Tractate Yomim, page 93. We just review a little bit the very end of last session, which is the subject of Sukkah. 93, the top of the page. And we said, אמר לרבה לאביי ולא מצינו מחיצה לאיסור והאיתמר שיחך על גבי אכסדרה שיש לה פצימין כשרה. So just review a little bit what we said at the end of yesterday. You have here two dfanot, two walls. You have here the patzimin, those foundation. That's a this is the portico, and he placed roofing on the top. So it's basically connected the two entities, and he make it a sukkah. So he said that's fine, as long as you have the two dfanot for sukkah. You need to have two walls, and the third one has to have at least tefach. So in that sense, we have the foundation of sukkah. However, ואילו ישבה פצימיה פסולה, but if he made, this is the next 330, ישבה פצימיה, make it equal and strong. So he basically built, according to Rashi, two partitions in addition to the original one. So it means that it's basically between, especially putting these two between the two partition, and you don't see them. In other words, you don't have any access to see anything. It's just fully black both sides. So he said in that, so it's invalid. So it means that they you see here that creating a mechitzot, creating the partition, not only created good, meaning created a validation of something, but creating a partition sometimes go the opposite way, can create a prohibition. And we said, אמר לאביי לדידי כשרה לדידה חסידות מחיצות. So we explained yesterday that Rabbi said to him, okay, in my view, it's valid. In your view, you have to remove the mechitza, the partition, which means by building the new one, it's not the cause of the prohibition, but because the whole idea is by building the new one, you remove the old one, and therefore this patzibim move out from the domain of the sukkah, and that's basically the cause. But when we talked earlier about planting a seed, you remember yesterday we talked about planting a seed, and we said that you have, remember the kamatz, the large one, the small one in both situations. So we said it's only in one straight way. So he explained that here, when he planting a seed or planting a vineyard in the small domain, that's the cause. So in other words, you can extend it here, but you cannot go in this way. So in other words, the large one is a separate domain. So you cannot basically compare one case to the other. And we concluded in that, for that discussion, אמר לרבא בר רב חנא לאביי ולא מצינו מחיצה לאיסור, והתניא בית חציו מקורה וחציו לא מקורה, גפנים מכאן מותר לזרוע מכאן, ולשווה את קירuyו אסור. So we explained that if you have instead of this open domain, if you have a house there that half has a roof and half not, and you have the vineyard in one side, so you can go the domain that it's open and planted the seed. But if he filled the entire roof, then he is prohibited from to sow other crops there. So what you see here, it's very clear that very placement of the mechitza, of the partition, for example, in the case of the roof, it's caused prohibition. And Abaye rejected, and he said, "Amar le'atam Siluk Mechitzotu. So again, we got the same idea that all of these cases, for example here, he says that was the original Mechitza, and building this part is basically abrogating, annulling the old one, and that's the cause of these prohibitions. So now, שלח לרבה לאביי ביד שמעיה ברב זרע, ולא מצינו מחיצה לאיסור. So far what we said, that all these examples of partition expresses a validation, meaning up to this point we understand that by erecting a partition, erecting a mechitza, you're creating a new situation that validates. Now you see a situation that you're creating a mechitza, but not the mechitza itself, but what happened before that created validation. So now we need to go the other way around, to bring a proof that that mechitza can go and create a prohibition. So again, to refresh memories of new faces, if you have in the cases of yesterday, you have a large roof and a small roof, or we have a large courtyard and a small courtyard. Just use again this illustration, make sure that we all the same page. Okay, so in the illustration of here, so you see a large roof, a small roof, and we have this part that we said Guda Sik, that it's come up to the high level. So we said basically that the large one in our discussion control the small one. Or we said in a situation like Chatzer, let's see Chatzer, at the same thing that discussion yesterday, you have a large yard and a small yard, so the large one is independent, and for our discussion the large one control one. If you look how it's structured, it's control one. So in that, for our discussion, we have here imaginatory mechitza, but we explain that creating a partition, a mechitza, creating a much more problem than without the mechitza. We brought the example of kilaim, of diverse kinds, and you see the example of roof and example of the chatzer, the courtyard. So here it's bring example of mechitzot hakerem. והתניא, יש במחיצות הכרם להקל ולהחמיר. There are situations that you create a partition in a vineyard, and it created both leniency and also stringency, which means you have a leniency with kilaim, with diverse kinds of seeds, and you have also the stringency. And now here is the explanation. כרם הנטוע עד עיקר מחיצה, זורע מעיקר מחיצה ואילך. So if you have a vineyard that is planted until the very base of the partition, so one can sow crops from the base of the other side of the partition onward. So you see here that is a tzad lekula, that is a side to make it lenient, because if you don't have mechitza marchik arba amot, you have a distance of the 4 cubit. But if it's kerem, you don't need to have the 4 cubits as a result of mechitza. she'ilu en sham mechitza marchik arba amot וזורע. We don't have the time, but in my book ביורע כלומר בראשי על הש"ס, I explained here Rashi, very interesting Rashi, that said כלומר עד יסוד מחיצה, סמוך ודבוק למחיצה, which means the foundation. But Rashi here was bothered with the whole idea, what does that mean, שאילו אין שם מחיצה, like it's imaginatory מחיצה. Anyway, מרחיק 400 וזורע, וזהו מחיצות הכרם להקל. He distanced 4 cubits from that vineyard and he planted, and that's what we use the term of leniency in mechitzot hakerem, in the vineyard, partition in the vineyard, because by having this mechitza, this partition, you do not need to distance. Uleachamir ketzad, when this partition in the vineyard apply stringency, היה משוך מן הכותל 11 אמה, meaning he didn't plant the vineyard attached to the fence, but he distanced them in 11 cubit. לא יביא זרע לשם. You cannot plant the seed, you cannot sow seeds there. שאלמלא אין מחיצה מרחיק 400. That if it wasn't a proper partition, you have to have a distance from the vineyard of 4 cubit וזורע. And he sowed the seeds onward. וזוהי מחיצות הכרם להחמיר. And this is the element in partition of a vineyard that cause stringency, leniency. It's called stringency. אמר לי, so Abaye respond to Rava, ולטעמיך. So according to your opinion, that we have to juxtapose our discussion to the discussion of kil'aim, diverse kind, between the vineyard and the fence. Otvan mimatnitin. Basically, when you're asking question, it carries a different way. If you're asking question, new proof is a different braita, or you have a proof from Mishnah, which is much reliable source. Because what happened with braitot, many times it's not 100% correct source. Sometimes the Rashi said it's something that you don't have. It's called not samcha, that you don't have a clear proof from that braita. It's almost like we know in the court system, hearsay evidence.
It's usually passed on orally, the braitot, right? Yeah, and the Mishnah was actually...
Yeah, so it's not only passed orally, but many times braitot is a collection of statements.
Right.
Versus Mishnah that established by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and you have... So they ask, why you don't use a clear Mishnah? Ditnan. Here we go to the Tractate Kil'aim, chapter 4, and the Mishnah said, and we also used that Mishnah earlier, if you remember, in page 3. Karachat HaKerem. So now we look at picture 331. We discussed it, by the way, on page 3. You can watch it. And this one is according to Beit Hillel, but anyway. Karachat HaKerem. If karachat in general, it's clearing area, meaning you have a bold area. So he said, karachat HaKerem, בית שמאי אומרים 24 אמות, ובית הלל אומרים 16 אמה, which means בית שמאי said, you need to have at least 24 cubits, and Beit Hillel said that it's enough 16. So this one basically according to Beit Hillel, as we said, because look, they sow the seeds here, which is 8 cubits. You have another 4 here, 4 cubits and 4 cubits. So now it's all together, if you measure all the size from one side to another, it's 16. That's according to Beit Hillel.
So Beit Hillel is saying that you need at least 8 amot to plant in, plus the 2 4 amot borders.
Correct.
Okay.
4, and in between 8. Okay? Now, ואיזוהי קרחת הכרם? כרם שחרב אמצעיתו. So what is the clearing in the vineyard? It's referring to vineyard whose middle section was basically laid bare, meaning this part is totally bare. And אם אין שם 16 אמה, לא יביא זרע לשם. If it's not 16 cubit, you should not bring planted sow seeds there, even at the middle of the bare area, that the distance between the seeds and the vineyard is great, because you basically have that empty spot, so it's considering part of that.
Now, does Beit Hillel hold then you need at least an area of 16 by 16 so that you can have a full 4 amot all the way around the other?
Yes.
If it's in the middle, so it has to be 16 by 16.
All together. But
right.
They don't talk about this situation, they talk about this part is bare.
No, I understand that, but I guess what they're saying is I'm talking about it has to be across and 16 by 16 in both directions, right?
Which means you have to have a... Okay, so they said here, just let's finish and go and we explain it. היו שם 16 אמה, נותן לו כדי עבודתו וזורע את המותר. So it means if you have the 4 cubits along either side of the vine and the left unsown to facilitate cultivation of the vines, so you sow the rest and clear area with foreign crops. So basically you can go by 16 by 16. Now the Mishnah continued and said, ואיזוהי מחול הכרם, and give me an example. What is מחול is like perimeter of the vineyard. Now you see here that this is, again, there is a picture that follow Beit Hillel, not Beit Shammai. So they said ben hakerem lagader, it was, you have a vacant area between the kerem and the gader, the fence, and שאם אין שם 12 אמה לא יביא זרע לשם. That if it's not 12, you should not plant the seed. So how is 12? You look, you see here 4 cubits, 4 amot here, you have another 4 cubits here, and you have another 4 cubits here. So 4, 4, 4 is 12. So that's the condition to plant the seed. But he said, היו שם 12 אמה, נותן לו כדי עבודתו וזוכר את המותר. So if there is a 12 cubit in that area, he provides the vineyards with its requisite work area, which is 4 cubit, and he sow the rest. Okay, however, when the vineyard not surrounded by fence, all he will need to do is distance himself 4 cubit from the last vine.
So when they refer to the work area, that's the 4 amot around it. I guess that's actually the separation, which creates the border between the two.
Yes.
Okay.
So they said, אלא התם, לאו היינו תמה דכל 4 אמות לגבי כרם עבודת הכרם. Which means the objection, it's not the reason that the mechitza is not considered cause the prohibition. The idea is that the 4 cubit around, it's considered the vineyard work area. You see this? It's a work area. You go and you need to have a path for your work area. So that's the reason you have it that. So therefore, it's actual part of it. So the regard to the 4 cubit alongside the fence surrounding the vineyard, since לגבי גדר כיוון לא מסדרה נפקו עם הפקר ליה דבין לדבין העיקר 4 חשיבה ולא לא חשיבה. So because since they cannot easily be sown because you have this wall, so therefore you renounce ownership over the area, and the space of the 4 cubit is significant to its own right, but if it's not significant, which means that they have the same reasoning applied to the Braita. So you see here, it's basically all the partition of that fence created this prohibition because it created a mechitza, it created a partition But by building that, you cannot have a seeds around. You have to have this distance. So therefore, you cannot say that there is a mechitza, that is a partition that created a prohibition. So now we are back to the discussion of Gdola and Ktana. Remember we talk about the kamatz, large and small. Amar Rav Yehuda, Shlosha karpifot. We go to a picture 333. Rav Yehuda said, if you have 3 different enclosures and they are basically alongside זה בצד זה, ושניים החיצונים מגופפים והאמצעי אינו מגופף, which means this is called gipuf. So you have that the two outer one protrude, they are wider, and the middle it's not protrude. So he said ויחיד בזה, ויחיד בזה, that it's individual that live here, individual that live here, individual that lived here. But you see, it's a different size. So he said, kesh yara. You treat it, it's like a caravan, which means that, you remember when we talk about caravan, we said that 3 people together is considered caravan. So when you have a caravan that stop, you can use even beit sa'atayim with partition to carry from one domain to another. ונותנים להן כל צורכן ודאי, that you provide them with all the space that they require, which means they can use the entire enclosure, even if it's very large, because it's no limit to the size of the enclosure area which members of the caravan may carry. So even this is very large, the whole enclosure area, it's very large, but you allow them, you treat them like a caravan, like shayara. Now, if things change, now it's the next picture, 334. Go now the opposite way. אמצעי מגופף והחיצוניים אינם מגופפים, ויחיד בזה ויחיד בזה אין נותנים להם אלא בית שש, which means that only you give them only 6 beit se'ah. So the enclosure area of only 2 beit se'ah person, the middle enclosure is larger than the outer one. So that's the principle that we said, that the person in the middle enclosure is regarded as though he established a resident in only one of the outer enclosure. So the group is only 2, so it doesn't have the legal status of caravan. Because you see what happened here, it's just the opposite way. So here we go to this issue of 3 karpifot. אחד בזה ואחד בזה ושניים באמצעים, מהו? So now, when we have a situation that the emtsai, the middle one, megupaf, but the amount of people changed now, and you have one in each side, but at the middle side, instead of 1, you have 2 people.
Okay. So do you say that it's all together, you merge them with one of the side, and you treat them as the shayara, as a caravan, or not? So they said, "Ilacha nafke tlat ahavu, v'ilacha nafke tlat ahavu, or dilma chad leacha nafik v'chad leacha nafik." So you can say either they go to one domain and become 3, or the other domain and become 3, since there are 2 people in the middle. Mm-hmm. Or you said each of the side take 1 and that's it, which means 1, there are 2, 1 go here, 1 go here. and therefore in each side they're considering two, and you don't considering them as a caravan.
So the two cannot join with both.
Correct.
The outside ones.
No,
and one
if you go this way, it's a dilemma. It's a predicament. You don't know. And another question, which is like another safek. You see sometimes in the Talmud they have sfek sfeka. You have one doubt and you have within another doubt. ואם תמצא לומר חד להך נפיק וחד להך נפיק. So if you go and tell me, okay, now you have two, so one will go here and the other will go the other side. So he said, שניים בזה ושניים בזה ואחד באמצעי, מהו? So if you have two people here and two people here and one in the middle, so now what do you do? Acha, ודאי. So because now either way you have three. אילך הנפיק תלת האבו ואילך הנפיק תלת האבו. או דילמה אימא לאח הנפיק ואימא לאח הנפיק. Says, okay, so since now there are two, so you go by three each side and you have a caravan, or you said no, so the middle one can have the option to go either way, and since we don't know which way he will choose to go, so you give only Beitzah time to each one. So the answer is Vehilcheta ba'ayan lekula. So in this type of questions you go lenient, so which means we provide with all the space that they require in these cases, and you treat them as a shayara, as a caravan. Now the next case, Amar Rav Chizda 93b. אמר רב חיסדא, גידור חמישה ומחיצה חמישה הם מצטרפים עד שיהיה או כולו בגידוד או כולו במחיצה. This is the five tfachim, 5 handbreadth. This is another 5. This, you see that they made it in different structure because this is the mechitza, this is the partition, and this is the gidud. So gidud, you call it embankment.
Embankment, yep.
Right. So if the height disparately between two surfaces of 5 handbreadth, an additional partition of 5 handbreadth, so basically you cannot join together to form of partition of 10 handbreadth. You regard it as only if the barrier is composed entirely of the embankment,
yep.
Embankment, or if it's composed entirely by partition. So you have to have materials that apply only to one type and not two. The Gemara explained later. Meitivei, shtei chatzerot, zo lemala mizo. The next illustration is 336. You have 2 chatzerot, zo lemala mizo. You see it sometimes in development of places like hills. I saw it in Seattle, in Washington. You have a situation like that. Okay, so he said you have here 2 courtyards, one above the other. The upper one, עליונה גבוהה מתחתונה 10 טפחים, ושיש בה גידוד 5 ומחיצה 5, מערבין 2 ומערבים 1. פחות מכאן מערבין 1 ומערבים 2. He said that the upper one is 10 handbreadth, 5 and 5, 10 handbreadth, and or that they have this embankment of 5 and partition of 5. So they establish 2 Eiruvin each for courtyard. You cannot combine them. Now, if the height is less than 10 handbreadth, remember that's one of the conditions, the two areas are considered as one domain, and they establish only one eruv and not two.
So if the difference in the height between the two is
Correct.
more than 10 tefachim.
Correct. So in other words, as long as you have the 10 tefachim, then you require a separate eruv. It's like separation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Amar Rav, or Rava, said, מודה רב חיסדא בתחתונה, הואיל ורואה פני עשרה. So he said, Rav Chisda agreed that the bottom one, the lower one, because it's face the wall of 10, which means the bottom one see it from upstairs, they see the mechitza, the partition, the wall of 10 handbreadth. So, יחי תחתונה תערב שניים, ולא תערב אחד, עליונה לא תערב לא אחד ולא שתיים. So he said, if that's the case, the bottom one should make a separate eruv. Now, they use here the word klomar in Rashi, and Rashi was bothered why they use the word te'arev shnayim. It's like, seems like literally it's two separate eruvin for the bottom one. The key point Rashi wants to emphasize that that it's not necessarily two. It means that it's it's separate, like divided, not one. The top one doesn't need to bother, which means because it's open to the bottom one, so it cannot have neither one nor two eruvin. Why? Because it's they have this opening, totally open to the bottom one. So Tosfot here deal a little bit with the 5 and 5. It's an issue of combining them, and he holds that the biblical precept cannot combine 5 and 5, but we'll not go there. We'll just continue. Amar Rabba bar Ula, כגון שהייתה עליונה מגופפת עד 10 אמות. So Rashi explained, מחיצה 10 על הגידוד עד 10 אמות אמצעיות שהניחוה כאין פתח, ולגבי תחתונה כולה סתומה הוא. ולגבי עליונה מחיצה ופתחה היא. You have two domains. You have here the embankment of 5, and you have here the 10. So what happened here, that it's like an entrance, it's like petach, this part. So he hold that only this part is the petach, is the entrance, and the mechitza itself, it's 5. So therefore, you have here a partition for both domain, because the bottom one, it's considering a totally satum, totally locked, because even the middle 10, it's considering a full mechitza. And the top one, they have mechitza with the petach. So they can make, the top one can make an independent eruv. So, therefore, you have to have two separate eruvin. So the Gemara asks, Yahachei, if so, Eima Seifa, פחות מכאן מערבים אחד ומערבים שתיים, if you tell me that the partition is high, less than 5 handbreadth, so both yards should make the eruv together. So according to the way we understand, we talk about the partition only the middle of 10 cubits, but the rest you have full 10 handbreadth. So it means for both yards you have a full accomplished partition, an opening of 10 cubit in the middle. So why you need to combine the Eruv together? Ibaya Chad Te'arev, Ibaya Trei Te'arev. If they want, they make together because they have a petach, they have entrance. If they want, they can have two separate because they have mechitza, they have petition between them. So the halacha is when you have the two courtyards with the entrance between them, you can make either way. Amar Rava, Breide Rava, כגון, no, you know what's happening here? כגון שנפרצה התחתונה במלואה לעליונה. He said that it's a situation that it's broken, which means Rashi said שאין ברחבה אלא 10 אמות, תלקח אסורה עליונה עליה. So this one is less than 10, and this is the bottom that it's totally open. And you see the size of the walls that makes it higher than the other. So if it's open, so that's what we learn in the Mishnah, that the ktana, the small one, is prohibited. So yachei tachtona chad te'arev, trei lo te'arev. So which means that they can combine the bottom and the top, and not two. Elyonai by trei te'arev, by chad te'arev. The top one have the choice, either 2 or 1. So the Gemara said, "Yache name, en ache name." So that's the true that the top one can combine or make it separate. וחיכתני פחות מכאן מערבין אחד ומערבין שניים התחתונה. So when you use the term that less than that you have to have 1 eruv and not 2, that's applied to the lower one, which means it's not referring to both courtyard but only to the lower ones. So he said, דרש מרימר גידוד 5 ומחיצה 5 מצטרפים. Remember we talk about embarking. So if you have 5 and 5, you can combine it. אשכחי רבינה לאחה בריידה רבא, he found רב אחא ברבא רבינה, אמר לי, תני מר מידי במחיצה. So you have any brighter that proof of 5 and 5, 5 embarkment and 5 מחיצה? אמר לי לא. והלכתה. So the question is, the Rashash asked, what do you learn from that? He explained there, but anyway, והלכתה. So גידוד 5 ומחיצה 5 מצטרפים. So the big question, what does that mean, והלכתה? Does that mean that that's the final halacha or not? Tosfot read said that is continuation of the answer, that I just receive a tradition that that's the halacha. But the Ol Zarua said that that's the final halacha the Gemara said. But anyway, the idea is that even the one who's in the top one, top courtyard, see only partition of 10, but if he stand there and he look, he can see 10 handbreadth, so he's considering a complete mechitza. So in other words, if you have 5 and 5, you can combine, or 5 embarkment and 5 mechitza, you can combine together. Next, now we're going to a different subject, and the subject now is Bai Rav Oshaya Diorin Habaim Beshabbat Ma'u Sheyasru. He asked if residents who arrive on Shabbat, which means they join the residents of the courtyard on Shabbat. For example, the walls between the two domains collapsed on Shabbat. So the new residents arrive in one courtyard from the other. So he said, does that mean that this resident created now a prohibition of the original residents to carry in the courtyard, even if they arrive on Shabbat itself or not. So the Ritva said, if you said, since it was allowed originally, partly, to carry before the wall collapsed, so now you go ahead and said, since you allow before Shabbat to carry from one domain to another, so now you allow during the Shabbat because the collapsedness of the wall happened after that was allowed, or you said no, that's the Ritva explanation. So he tried to bring a proof. Amar Rav Chizda, or some said Amar Rav Chinana, Tashma, חצר גדולה שנפרצה לקטנה, הגדולה מותרת והקטנה אסורה מפני שהיא כפתחה של גדולה. Remember we talked yesterday in Tzadik Bet? If you have a large courtyard and a small courtyard, so the large one is independent, the large one you control, etc. Because the small one is considering the entrance of the big one. So, meaning even it happens during Shabbat, therefore it's prohibited. אמר רבא אימר מבעוד יום נפרצה. No, you have to say that it happened before Shabbat. So therefore, that's the reason why the small one, the Ktanaf, prohibited. But you cannot prove from that the residents that come in on Shabbat prohibited. So it means that if it's collapsed during Shabbat, it's not correct to say that the small one is prohibited in that Shabbat. אמר לאביי לא תימא אמר אימר אלא ודאי מבעוד יום נפרצה. You don't say maybe it's happened before Shabbat. You have to say that definitely it happened before Shabbat. Why? Because the ham mahu d'amar, because you, meaning Rabbah, is the one who said באי מיני מרב הונא ובאי מיני מרב יהודה. I ask both Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda, עירוב דרך הפתח. If you have two courtyards that in between you have an entrance, you have a wall and you have an entrance, and they combine together a ruvei chatzerot, a join of the courtyard, by having this entrance, ונסתם הפתח, and that entrance was closed during Shabbat, such as something collapsed and it's closed, etc. Or a rav derech halon, if you make, you remember we talk about some cases that you make the eruv or by using the window between the two courtyard, v'nistam halon, and that window was closed during Shabbat. Mau, what's the halakha? Do you allow to carry now between one courtyard to another? Even now you do not have a window or entrance, so because you make an eruv altogether before Shabbat, so that carry it later, even the circumstance change or not. Ve'amar li, Rav Huna respond to me, and that's the same Rav Yehuda said to me, Shabbat kevan shehutra, hutra. He said Shabbat, it was permitted and remains so until the conclusion of Shabbat. So if a breach that adds residence occurred on Shabbat, the breach does not render prohibited activities that were permitted when the Shabbat began. So this is going to Machloket Amoraim. The question is, if you said Shabbat kevan shehutra utra, because it's allowed already in advance, so that carried on, which means basically one of the discussion halakha is when you created a situation and you make halachic decision for that situation, is that carry on later or is just for that very moment? Is that retroactive that set up, or it's just for that situation, and if things change, it changes the halachic status? Itmar kotel shebein shtei chatzerot, if you have a wall between two courtyard, which means it wasn't an entrance and did not combine the both courtyard together, but each of them has an individual category, shenafal, that it's collapsed during Shabbat, and therefore the two courtyards now open to each other. Rav Amar En Metaltelim Bo Ela Be'arba Amot. Rav said, you remember what we discussed, that they have one of the category of Carmelit that allowed to carry only in the 4 cubits. So even before Shabbat, in those courtyards you can carry it, but now since it's open, it make it prohibited. And we don't say Kevan de Utra Utra, because it's allowed in one stage, so it carry forever. So the Ritva in Maharsha said that you have to say that each resident of each courtyard make an Eruv in advance in this situation. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel responded and he said, no, זה מטלטל הדיקר מחיצה וזה מטלטל הדיקר מחיצה. Shmuel said that each of them can carry up to the base of the former mechitza partition. That's the way it was before this wall collapsed, and even the both open to each other, it's considered as the category Shabbat kevan she'utra utra, because you allow it. It's okay. So, for example, vessels that you allow in one domain, in one courtyard. So, according to Shmuel, you can carry to another domain, even if each resident of the courtyard make independent eruv. That's what Rashi said. So now the Gemara elaborates on that and said, "V'had de Rav lav beferush itmar, ela miklala itmar," which means it's what Rav said. It's not what he expresses by his own mouth, but you derive from certain actions you see by him. Here is the story. The Rav Shmuel Aviyat veBaruch Hatzer, that both of them, these two giant Rav and Shmuel, sitting on Shabbat in that courtyard. Nafal Guda de Veine Veine. The wall between the yards collapsed. Omar lu Shmuel, Shkolu gli manigidu ba. Shmuel said to the people in the courtyard, guess what? Take a garment and put it in that place that the wall collapsed, and you now can carry the clothing up to that partition, because it was allowed in advance. It's okay. Adrino Rav le'apei. Rav look, and he show an anger, like act of unhappiness. What Shmuel said. Amar lehu Shmuel. Shmuel said to him, "Ikapid Abba shkolu hamnai vekatruba." If Rav is unhappy with that, you should take his gartel, his avnet, right, his belt, and tight the talit together. So that's basically make it strong. So basically that's applied, the Meiri said, only in the rabbinic way, rabbinic law, but not in the biblical. But it's like
isn't there concern about essentially building a partition with the talit?
Yeah, but it's like
I mean, I understand the concern they're expressing is about carrying the talit to there, but is it not a concern also to hang the talit as a partition, to create a partition?
Yeah, but Shabbat? Here it basically the way that some Mefarshim said that it's disrespectful act. You know, it's just expression in that sense. But now the Gemara explained and said, "Velishmuel lama liha." Why he needs to do that? That's, I think, what you asked. He said, "Ha'amar ze metzaltel adikar mechitza v'ze metzaltel adikar mechitza," which means that even you don't have talit, you should carry it. So why you need to bother with that? So he said, "Shmuel avid letzniuta be'alma," just the act of modesty, not that you're allowed to carry them. And he said, "V'Rav isvir le de'asir lama li." So if Rav hold that it's prohibited, why Shmuel used this to take open the talit? He should said clearly to Shmuel why he just turned away his face from that. So he said, Atri Shmuel Abba, which means there's a sensitive subject. It's called Mora de Asre. It's a very sensitive subject, and I'm just give you a vignette of that. Imagine that each of all my great students tomorrow morning become a very important Rabbanim, God willing.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll be so smart and so good that you look at me and you said, you know, we know better than you know. Which, by the way, happened to me many times. I have the privilege to have many Balei Tshuva, many people who become religious. So at the first stage, I was their Rebbe for a couple of years. And then they went uphill, in their view, and now I'm good, but not good enough. But anyway, so it turns, there is a concept in Halacha that it's called Mara de Atra. Mara de Atra, or in Yiddish, Mora de Asre, which means you have a domain that the Rav, or the Rabbi, or the Harav, is the one who in charge in that place. He's the one who makes halachic rules.
Mm-hmm.
You know that until Mashiach will come, everyone knows that there are a lot of halachot that is teiku, that it's open.
Mm-hmm.
So how you have a psak halacha, how do you go to a final decision? You go by the Mara de Asre, which means you go by the Rav of that synagogue, shul, neighborhood,
Yep.
the one who ruled the halacha. So if you have 1 or 5 or 10 rabbanim there, you go by the Mara de Asre. He is the one who make the final decision. So now we understand even Rav, in that sense, believe what he feels is right. And he is giant, either equal or even more than Shmuel, or in a sense he feels much stronger that he is right. But since Shmuel is the Mora de Asre, since Shmuel is the one who is the leader of that community, Rav did not want to show the people, the student and other, that he is challenged his authority, that he's undermined his decisions, Shmuel's decision. So therefore what he do is just turn away his face from that. So he said, if you hold that Shmuel is the Mora de Asre, is the one who in charge for that community, so why he turn his face at all? You should just display equanimity, just keep quiet and that's it. He says, he turned away his face that people not think that he changed his decision and he followed Shmuel's direction. So in one hand, he doesn't want to embarrass Shmuel. On the other hand, he doesn't want people to think that he basically now follow and totally backed off his decision against Shmuel. In other words, it's not a personal, but he feel halacha is different. So he just turned his face. By acting so, he basically said that, okay, he's the Mara de Asre Shmuel, so you have to follow what he said. But I personally disagree with that. I personally think that it shouldn't be that way. So again, as I said earlier, it's a sensitive subject. The Maharshal, for example, took out the word v'hadar b'mishmat. He put it in parentheses, so take it out, which means the whole idea that the Rav retracted his opinion with regard to this halacha. He doesn't want that to be incorporated as part of the Gemara, the Maharshal. So again, it's a sensitive subject. In general, we say that we go by the Rav of the Shul. Sometimes, when I came to America, what it was, almost 18 years ago, I have a president at that time, he rest in peace, Mr. Schwartz. So he used to say, for my predecessor at that time in New Jersey, he used to say, even the rabbi is wrong, is right. So, in that sense, Shmuel was the Mara de Asre. Now we go to the practical halachot.
My question on this, though, it would seem that the machloket, Shmuel believes that you could, even after the wall collapsed, that you could still carry
Correct.
Within the chatzer, so therefore you could carry the talit over there.
But remember, at the top of that, he was the posek, he was the Rav there.
Right, so I understand. So his ruling is what stands in that area. But my question there, isn't there a concern about actually setting up the talit as a partition on Shabbat, is essentially creating a new partition on Shabbat? Isn't that?
Not
I mean,
by
I understand
Shmuel.
the carrying
Not
question.
by Shmuel.
Well, Shmuel says it's okay to carry, but what? So Shmuel believes it's okay to also create a partition on Shabbat.
It's a good question. The way I understand this, no, it was only.
I mean, I understand it says it was for the purpose of privacy,
Yes.
which I understand, but still, he's still creating a wall essentially, or some sort.
But-
with the
But why? It's already within the permissible domain.
But isn't it boneh? Isn't it building by creating? That's. I
Good
guess that's
question.
my question.
I have to check it.
Okay.
I don't know. It's a question. In the first glance, what I think right away, the minute you allow certain domain, so you have it within the domain that you can carry and do things. So
Right.
therefore, if you need something within Shabbat for it, Shabbat itself, it's not a building, a structure. That's the way I understand it. But I'll check it.
Okay, because I mean, I understand the whole carrying to do that. It's just a question of once you actually set it up as a wall, is that not
I
boneh
have
at
to check
that
it.
point?
It's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go to a practical halachot. שולחן ערוך אור החיים 630. אכסדרה שיש לה פצימים. If one place roofing atop a portico with doorposts, the sukkah is valid whether the doorposts are visible from the inside or from the outside. That's the Rambam's, not the Rashi interpretation. The Rema dispute this halacha, claiming that one may not build sukkah in this manner, not at least lechatchila, not at the first place. We discuss also karachat akerem. This is Rambam, Sefer Zra'im, Ilchot Kil'aim, chapter 7. If a full-fledged partition, 10 handbreadth high, separate vineyards from the adjacent land, it is permitted to sow other crops on the other side. If there is a clearing free of vines inside the vineyards, 16 by 16 cubits, that's basically Beit Hillel in size, it is permitted to sow crops there 4 cubits in the vine. And that's again the Rambam Ilchot Kilayim chapter 7. Now we ask a question about Shalosh Karpifot. Shalosh Karpifot is this one. 3 enclosure in a row are considered a single domain. This halacha is effect only if the middle enclosure is narrower than the outer enclosure. Gipufin. And its opening into those enclosure is less than 10 cubits. The Ritva add another condition. The wall separating the enclosures must not be a side post, that it's even with the entrance on the inside and visible on the outside. This addition, there can be only one person each of them. Now, the Tur said that the residents of the enclosures receive only 2 betzeah, and the middle enclosure is, if the middle enclosure is wider than the other, and the other 2 are fully breached into it, so the residents of the outer enclosure are each provided an area of 2 betzeah. If there are 2 people in one of these enclosures and a single person or 2 people in the middle one, whether they are all situated in the middle one or one of the outer one, they are considered like member of a caravan, like shayara, and they are provided with all space they require in the middle enclosure. That's Magen Avraham Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 360.
We also talk about Gidud Chamisha and Mechitza Chamisha, which means you have embankment of 5 and partition of 5. So this is Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 362. An embankment 5 and a handbreadth high, and the wall is 5 handbreadth high, combined to, from a valid partition, handbreadth in height. So that's basically the idea of 5 and 5 together, there are 10. Now we discuss a situation that it was a wall between the two and it collapsed. כותל שבין חצרות שנפל, או חצר שנפרצה לרשות הרבים. So we say that wall between two courtyards that collapsed after the residents of each courtyard establish an inside Eruv. If the wall collapsed on Shabbat, is permitted to carry throughout the courtyard up to where the wall once stood, as though it was not fallen. That's the Shmuel Halacha, go by his ruling. Now, if it's a courtyard and it's breached into a public domain, then you cannot carry, because it's basically Carmelit, and it's only Arba Amot. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 374 and 361. So again, the big question is, what exactly happened? If it happens to a public domain, then it has to be the rule of Carmelit, and that's basically following the sages, the halacha by the rabbis.